Welcome to our deep dive into the world of Charles T. Munger. You've given me a fascinating collection of material here, excerpts from Poor Charlie's Almanack, some biographical pieces, even a few anecdotes about his life.
It seems you want to understand the man behind the millions.
Yeah.
His unique way of thinking and how it applies to life beyond the balance sheet.
Exactly. The idea of a lattice work of mental models really grabbed my attention.
Right.
What is that exactly and how does it work?
Well, Munger argues that drawing knowledge from diverse fields, psychology, history, math, biology, you name it,
Wow.
gives you a more comprehensive understanding of how the world works. It's like having different lenses to view the same problem.
So instead of just having a hammer and seeing every problem as a nail, you've got a whole toolbox. I like that.
Precisely. He uses the analogy of a chess master playing blindfolded.
Okay.
They can visualize the whole board because they deeply understand the relationships between the pieces. Multiple mental models allow you to see those connections in any situation.
Okay, so how does one actually build this lattice work? Where do we even start?
One of the most important mental models Munger emphasizes is the power of incentives. He believes understanding incentives is crucial to predicting behavior, even seemingly irrational behavior.
Now, that makes sense. Everyone responds to incentives in some way. But how does that translate into real-world decision-making?
Think about it this way. Munger tells a story about closing his textile plant and moving it to Utah. He specifically chose that location because of the strong work ethic of believing Mormons. He recognized their inherent drive to work diligently and deliver quality. He bet on that incentive, and it paid off.
Wow, so it's about recognizing those underlying motivations and using them to your advantage, almost like a hidden layer of logic.
Exactly. And Munger encourages us to always look for those hidden layers. He's constantly analyzing both the positive and perverse effects of incentives, especially in business and investing. He understands that people respond predictably to certain motivators.
So incentives are key. What other mental models are crucial to this lattice work?
Well, closely tied to understanding incentives is recognizing and avoiding psychological pitfalls.
Okay.
Munger argues that various psychological tendencies can lead us astray. Things like over-optimism, confirmation bias, even the influence of stress on our decision-making.
He dives deep into those in The Psychology of Human Misjudgment.
Right.
I found that section particularly fascinating.
He certainly doesn't shy away from exploring our inherent flaws.
Right.
And he doesn't just list these pitfalls, he provides vivid examples. He recounts a story about a surgeon who genuinely believed removing the gallbladder was the solution to most medical problems.
Wait, seriously? That seems extreme.
It does, but it highlights how even professionals with years of experience and expertise can fall victim to their own biases. The surgeon had built his entire practice around this one procedure, and it completely skewed his thinking.
That's a little scary. So how do we avoid falling into these traps ourselves? Do we just need to be more aware?
Awareness is the first step. Munger argues that by understanding these pitfalls through the lens of psychology, we can start to recognize them in ourselves and in others. We can then use that awareness to make more rational decisions.
So it's about combining knowledge from different fields to get a clearer picture. Not just psychology, but ethics, history, maybe even a bit of biology.
That's the beauty of the lattice work. It's about weaving different threads of knowledge together to create a more comprehensive understanding of the world and ourselves.
This is starting to make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So we've got incentives and avoiding psychological pitfalls.
Right.
What else should we add to our mental toolbox?
One of the more surprising aspects, given his complex thinking, is Munger's emphasis on simple, old-fashioned values.
You're right. It's almost like he's saying, don't overthink it, just do the right thing.
There's a real back-to-basics feel in a lot of his advice. He champions values like honesty, hard work, and learning from mistakes. In one anecdote, he praises his father's business partner, a man who insisted on working 14-hour days to catch up on commitments. He admired that level of dedication.
So no shortcuts or magic formulas, just pure grit and integrity.
That's a key takeaway here. He believes that consistently applying basic principles over time with discipline and patience is the key to long-term success.
Speaking of patience, this is where his famous fat pitch analogy comes into play, right? The one about waiting for the perfect opportunity.
Exactly. Both Munger and Buffett, his longtime business partner, believe in waiting for the ideal investment opportunity, the fat pitch, rather than chasing after mediocre investments. They'd rather sit on a pile of cash than settle for a less than ideal situation.
Like Ted Williams with his 77 cell strike zone, only swinging at the pitches he knew he could hit best. A lot of us could learn from that kind of discipline.
Absolutely, especially in today's world of instant gratification. But Munger argues that it's this very discipline that allows for extraordinary results in the long run.
So building this lattice work is a marathon, not a sprint. It's about continuously expanding your knowledge and refining your decision-making process.
Precisely. And what's fascinating is how Munger uses his own life experiences as learning opportunities. He's constantly observing, analyzing, and extracting wisdom from the world around him.
That's where the biographical material comes in handy. It's one thing to read about these theories, but seeing them in action is invaluable.
It adds a layer of depth and authenticity to his teachings, and it highlights that he's not just preaching from a pedestal. He's lived these principles, made mistakes, and learned from them.
Which brings us to another crucial point: lifelong learning.
Yes.
Munger is clearly a voracious reader, always seeking new knowledge and challenging his own assumptions. He even talks about learning from the eminent dead.
Yes. He encourages us to read biographies and learn from the great thinkers of the past. It's like building a network of mentors across time. He believes there's immense value in studying the successes and failures of those who came before us.
So it's not just about acquiring knowledge, but about actively using it to improve our thinking and decision-making.
Exactly. And it's through this continuous learning process that we can refine our lattice work and become more effective in all aspects of our lives.
So far, we've established that Munger's lattice work is about combining knowledge from various disciplines, understanding incentives, recognizing psychological pitfalls, and applying basic principles consistently. Is that a fair summary?
Absolutely. It's a holistic approach to thinking and decision-making, one that emphasizes both knowledge and character. And as you said, it's a lifelong journey of learning and self-improvement.
This is a lot to digest, but in a good way. I'm starting to see the world differently already.
And we've only just begun to scratch the surface. There's so much more to explore in Munger's world. We haven't even touched on his thoughts on education, the legal profession, or even the potential dangers of unchecked biases in fields like economics.
Whoa, sounds like we're just getting started. I'm already itching to unpack all that, but perhaps we should take a pause here for now.
A wise decision. After all, Munger himself stresses the importance of patience and thoughtful consideration.
Right. No need to rush this deep dive. We'll be back soon to explore more of Munger's wisdom and see what other gems we can unearth from this treasure trove of knowledge you've provided.
Welcome back to our deep dive. Ready to delve deeper into Munger's world?
Absolutely. We covered so much ground in the last segment. The lattice work of mental models, incentives, biases. It's fascinating how these concepts all connect.
And you provided some intriguing material on Munger's perspective on education. Shall we explore that next?
Let's. He seems to have strong opinions about how we learn and what we should be learning.
That's quite apparent in his 1986 Harvard School graduation speech. Instead of giving typical advice, he outlines how to live a miserable life.
Sounds counterintuitive,
Yeah.
but I remember reading that. By inverting the concept, he highlights what's truly important for a successful and fulfilling life. Clever.
Precisely. He emphasizes avoiding pitfalls like envy and resentment, learning from mistakes, and embracing lifelong learning. These principles, he suggests, are essential not only for personal development, but for achieving success in any field.
It's interesting how he connects seemingly disparate ideas like personal growth and professional achievement. It all comes back to that multidisciplinary approach, doesn't it?
Absolutely. He critiques the tendency for academia to be siloed into separate departments, arguing that this fragmentation limits our ability to solve complex, real-world problems.
It's like trying to understand a complex machine by only looking at individual parts in isolation. You miss the bigger picture and how those parts interact.
He uses the analogy of playing bridge while only counting trumps and ignoring everything else. A recipe for disaster, as he puts it. Munger advocates for drawing from a wide range of disciplines, building a lattice work of knowledge that can be applied to any situation.
He even criticizes some economics professors, doesn't he, for being too theoretical and ignoring the practical realities of human behavior.
Yes. He argues that traditional economics often oversimplifies human behavior, leading to inaccurate predictions and ineffective policies. He coined a term for this, embezzlement.
I remember that. It sounds like some kind of financial crime. What exactly does it mean?
Think of it like this. Munger uses embezzlement to describe how layers of unnecessary fees and expenses, often hidden or obscured, can slowly drain away wealth over time, just like embezzlement.
So it's a form of financial erosion, a slow leak that can be hard to detect until it's too late.
Exactly. And he specifically calls out the investment management industry for its high fees and complex structures that often don't benefit the actual investors.
So instead of generating returns, we're actually siphoning them off through hidden fees.
That's Munger's argument. He's particularly critical of what he calls hyperactive trading, where investors are constantly buying and selling, racking up transaction costs without necessarily improving their returns.
It seems counterintuitive, but sometimes doing less leads to better outcomes.
That aligns perfectly with his fat pitch investing philosophy. It's about focusing on quality investments and holding them for the long haul rather than chasing short-term gains and getting caught up in the frenzy of the market.
Patience and discipline, two of Munger's recurring themes.
Yes, and those themes extend beyond investing. Munger advocates for a more ethical and rational approach to business in general. He emphasizes the importance of honesty, integrity, and always putting the client's interests first.
He tells that great story about his father's friend and client, Grant McFadden, the Omaha Ford dealer, known for his honesty and fairness.
Exactly. Munger praises him for his unwavering integrity, holding him up as an example of how to conduct business ethically and build a lasting reputation. He even mentions how his father, a lawyer, used this story as a subtle teaching moment, encouraging him to emulate McFadden's behavior.
It's amazing how such a simple story can convey such a powerful message. It's a reminder that character and ethics are as important as any technical skill or knowledge.
Absolutely. And it highlights the importance of surrounding yourself with people you admire and can learn from, people who embody the values you aspire to.
So we've got education, economics, ethics, all interwoven with these core mental models. What else stands out from our deep dive into Munger's world?
One thread that runs through almost everything you've provided is Munger's fascination with human psychology, particularly the tendencies that lead to misjudgment and poor decision-making.
Ah, yes. His famous psychology of human misjudgment talk. He really dissects all the ways our brains can trick us even when we think we're being rational.
He provides a comprehensive list of these tendencies: psychological denial, excessive self-regard, over-optimism, the tendency to follow authority figures blindly. He even delves into the impact of stress and emotional arousal on our judgment.
It's like he's created a user manual for the human mind, but one that focuses on all the glitches and bugs that can lead to errors.
And he argues that by understanding these tendencies, by recognizing them in ourselves and in others, we can start to make more rational decisions. We can learn to question our assumptions, seek out diverse perspectives, and avoid common pitfalls.
But he's also realistic, right? He acknowledges that even with this awareness, we're all still susceptible to these biases. He even admits to making his own share of mistakes.
Which makes him all the more relatable and credible. He's not presenting himself as some kind of infallible sage. He's a lifelong learner, constantly refining his own thinking and acknowledging his own fallibility.
And he encourages us to do the same. He's a big believer in the power of self-improvement and continuously challenging our own assumptions. It's about never becoming complacent or thinking we have all the answers.
Exactly. And one of the most valuable tools he offers is the idea of inverting problems.
I remember that. Instead of trying to solve a problem directly, he suggests asking, how could I create this problem? It's a fascinating way to approach challenges.
It is. By understanding how something can go wrong, by identifying the potential pitfalls and mistakes, you gain valuable insights into how to prevent those things from happening in the first place.
It's like thinking backward to move forward, using negative thinking to achieve positive outcomes. Very clever.
It's a powerful tool for problem solving, decision making, and even risk management. It forces you to consider all angles and anticipate potential challenges before they arise.
Okay, so we've covered mental models, education, psychology, ethics, inverting problems. There's a lot to unpack here.
There is, but it all points to a core theme: developing a more comprehensive and sophisticated way of thinking. It's about going beyond surface-level understanding and really digging into the underlying principles that govern the world and human behavior.
Munger isn't just offering information. He's providing a framework for thinking, a way to navigate complexity and make sense of the world around us.
Precisely. And he urges us to be lifelong learners, constantly expanding our knowledge base, refining our mental models, and challenging our own assumptions.
It's about building a system for making better decisions, consistently over time, one that's grounded in both knowledge and character. It's an ongoing process of self-improvement.
He even emphasizes the importance of developing good habits and routines to help us avoid those common pitfalls we discussed earlier. Things like using checklists, deliberately seeking out disconfirming evidence, and taking time to reflect on past decisions to identify patterns and areas for improvement.
This deep dive has been incredibly insightful. Munger's approach to thinking is so nuanced and multifaceted. It's like peeling back layers of an onion with each new concept we explore.
And with each layer, we gain a deeper understanding of not just the world around us, but ourselves as well. Our motivations, our biases, our strengths and weaknesses.
I'm starting to see why he and Buffett have been so successful. They're not just brilliant investors, they're master thinkers, constantly learning and adapting.
They've developed a system for navigating complexity and uncertainty, one that combines intellectual rigor with a deep understanding of human nature. And they generously share their wisdom through stories, anecdotes, and practical advice.
There's so much wisdom packed into the material you provided, it's almost overwhelming. But in a good way, it makes you want to keep digging deeper and learning more.
That's the hallmark of a true intellectual journey, and that's precisely what Munger encourages us to do. He doesn't offer easy answers or quick fixes. He challenges us to think for ourselves, to build our own lattice work of knowledge, and to become lifelong learners.
This has been an amazing exploration so far. We've covered a ton of ground, but I feel like there's still so much more to uncover.
Well, you did include some fascinating material on Munger's career in law and his thoughts on the legal profession.
You're right. Let's save that for our next session. We can delve into his experiences, his views on ethics, and see what other gems we can unearth from his time in the legal world.
I'm eager to continue this exploration. Until then, perhaps you might consider rereading some of these passages and reflecting on what resonates most deeply with you. What lessons can you apply to your own life and work?
That's a great suggestion. I'm sure there are still plenty of hidden gems waiting to be unearthed from this treasure trove of wisdom. Welcome back to our deep dive into the mind of Charles T. Munger. We've explored his lattice work of mental models, his unique perspectives on education and economics, and even his insights into the psychology of human misjudgment. It's been quite a journey.
Indeed, and we still have that fascinating material about his legal career to discuss. A lesser-known aspect of his life, but one that clearly shaped his worldview.
You know, it's interesting to think about how his background in law might have influenced his approach to business and investing. Are there any connections that stand out to you?
Definitely. Remember, he co-founded the prestigious law firm Munger, Tolles & Hills after achieving success in real estate.
Yeah.
But he wasn't your typical lawyer, at least according to the biographical snippets you provided.
Right. There's that story about the cynical advice he received early in his career.
Right.
A senior partner told him to always make the client feel like the smartest person in the room. They make the senior partner look smart, and only then, if there was room, let his own brilliance shine through.
Classic law firm politics. But Munger, being Munger, didn't exactly follow that playbook.
Right.
He focused on what he believed was right, on finding the truth and serving his clients with integrity, even if it meant ruffling a few feathers along the way.
That independent streak seems to be a defining characteristic of his personality. He's not afraid to challenge conventions or go against the grain if he believes there's a better way.
Exactly. And that approach led him to gravitate towards more complex cases, the ones that required deep thinking, creative problem solving, and a multidisciplinary perspective. He seemed to relish those challenges, applying his mental models to legal problems just as he does with everything else.
And this is where his unwavering commitment to ethics really shines through, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. There are numerous examples of Munger refusing to compromise his principles, even when it might have been financially advantageous to do so. He always seemed to prioritize doing the right thing over maximizing profits.
Like that story about him walking away from a lucrative deal because he suspected the other party wasn't being entirely truthful.
Right.
He could have easily looked the other way, but his conscience wouldn't allow it.
It speaks volumes about his character. He has a deep aversion to any kind of deception or manipulation, whether in business, law, or personal relationships. It's about maintaining a reputation for honesty and integrity, which he believes is essential for long-term success and a fulfilling life.
Which explains why he's so critical of practices like aggressive accounting and shady tax shelters.
Right.
He sees them as not just unethical, but ultimately detrimental to the entire system.
He understands that short-term gains achieved through questionable means often lead to long-term consequences. He's always looking at the bigger picture, considering the second and third-order effects of decisions and advocating for practices that benefit society as a whole.
It all circles back to that long-term thinking we discussed earlier. He's not just focused on winning the next deal or making the next dollar. He's playing the infinite game, building a legacy of integrity and wisdom.
And he's not afraid to speak out against practices he believes are harmful, even if it makes him unpopular or ruffles feathers in powerful circles. He's willing to stand up for what he believes is right, even if it means going against the grain or challenging the status quo.
There's a real sense of moral courage in the way he approaches these issues. He's not just talking the talk, he's walking the walk. It's inspiring, and it makes you think about how we can apply that same principled approach to our own lives and careers.
That's the beauty of Munger's wisdom. It transcends specific fields or industries. It's about developing a framework for making sound judgments, living a life of integrity, and contributing to the betterment of society.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener. I'm starting to see the world through a different lens, one that's more multidisciplinary, more attuned to incentives and psychological biases, and more focused on ethical considerations.
And perhaps most importantly, one that values honesty, integrity, and continuous learning. These are the cornerstones of Munger's philosophy, and they're principles we can all strive to embody in our own lives.
It's like he's given us a set of mental tools to think more clearly, make better decisions, and navigate the complexities of the world with wisdom and integrity.
Tools that can be applied to any aspect of our lives. Our careers, our relationships, our investments, and even our personal growth.
Well, this has been an incredible journey through the mind of Charles T. Munger. I feel like I've gained invaluable insights and a renewed appreciation for the power of lifelong learning and ethical decision-making.
As have I. The depth and breadth of his thinking is truly remarkable, and his willingness to share his wisdom so generously is a gift to us all.
I have a feeling we'll be revisiting these insights for years to come, applying them to new challenges and opportunities as they arise.
As will I. And perhaps as you encounter those inevitable crossroads in life, you might find yourself asking, what would Charlie Munger do?
That's a fantastic takeaway. Thank you for guiding us through this deep dive. It's been a privilege to learn from such a brilliant and principled mind.
The pleasure was all mine. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep building your own lattice work of knowledge and integrity.
And remember, sometimes the most valuable insights come from the most unexpected places, just like this deep dive into the world of Charles T. Munger.